As soon as I made this one acknowledgement about life, I feel like I was better able to manage my depression and improve my life. This acknowledgement is seemingly obvious to a lot of people, but not so much to others. So whether you're a severely depressed person or you're high on life, I think this video will help you. Hello, for anyone new here, I'm Steve, and I've experienced depression for many years in my life. I feel like I've got a good grasp on it today through self-awareness and a good understanding of my coping mechanisms. Those coping mechanisms for me being outside, walking, lots of love and support from my family, staying focused on goals, having a good financial buffer, engaging in hobbies, even working. And no, I don't love my job, I just tolerate it. I think to me, I would be more on the side of depression is usually caused by life circumstances more than a chemical imbalance. Now, I'm not a scientist and I don't want people in the comments saying, oh, you're not professional, it is a chemical imbalance. I'm saying it's probably more to do with life circumstances, in my opinion. Let's get to the point though. I first heard this philosophy, this view on life, or you could just say outright fact. Life is suffering. I first heard that said by Jordan Peterson, and it kind of rang a bell in me. It kind of all made sense. This idea that life at its very core is suffering. So our goal should be to reduce that suffering. Anything we do in life is to reduce the suffering. So rather than constantly chasing happiness, which isn't sustainable, think of everything as simply reducing your suffering. You might say, oh, that's very negative, that's pessimistic, that's very depressing. Yeah, I'm sure it does sound like that. Admittedly, I am a glass half full kind of person, but I wouldn't change that about myself, and I think it's worked to my advantage. I don't consider myself a very naive person. I often think there are a lot of very happy people out there, you know, the type of people who are always really vibrant, full of energy, full of life. Honestly, my first thought usually is they are ignorant of the world. It's the saying, ignorance is bliss. But then I think to myself, if they are so high on life, then when something inevitably comes crashing, they come crashing right down. Whereas for somebody like myself who tries to keep a happy medium, then I don't have as far to fall. I'm not going to crash and burn. I'm not naive. I take this view of life is suffering, and anything I'm doing in the meantime is merely to reduce suffering. Of course, I feel joy, I feel moments of happiness, but it's just a mindset switch of not regarding that as happiness, but as reducing your suffering. We all get in this trap of chasing happiness, when really you should just be chasing contentment. Happiness is not sustainable. We were not put on this planet to be happy. We were born, we have to survive, we die. A lot of the real suffering in today's world comes about through things we could change as a human species, the wars we wage on each other, the immense gap between poor and rich. We hurt each other, we kill each other, we don't make it easy on each other. Having said that, if we did live in a better world, there would still be suffering. There would have to be some really serious advances in medicine and technology, for example, to alleviate a lot of the suffering in illnesses and sickness. You know, devastating diseases such as dementia and cancer. Are you really going to be one of those people who's like, oh, life's amazing, life's wonderful, life is a gift, when you've got a loved one who doesn't even know your name, who has forgotten who you are? Does life seem so amazing then? I'm not even saying we should try and completely eradicate suffering. I don't think we can. Even if we made a lot of improvements in our world today, there would still always be some elements of suffering. For example, if your girlfriend breaks up with you, that's not going to be very pleasant. But usually it's for the best, even if it does not seem like it at the time. And usually you do become stronger and a better version of yourself. I've been through heartbreak, but if you gave me the option to go back in time and rekindle those relationships, I wouldn't, because I've ended up where I should in a relationship right now with the person I should be with. So no regrets, and I wouldn't change anything. Or another version of suffering might be losing your job, but there would always be other jobs. So the point I'm trying to make is life at its core is suffering in terms of the fact that you were born, you live X amount of years, and you die. You need to eat, you need to survive. So one way I reduce my suffering is by accumulating money, like a lot of us do. We need money to shelter ourselves, for transport, for food, to survive. Lack of money would enhance the levels of suffering. You'd be homeless. Less money, more suffering. That is undeniable. That is not to say that at the opposite end of the scale, a really wealthy person would not experience any suffering. Of course not. But they stand less chance of experiencing as much suffering if they have more money. For example, a really wealthy person gets very sick. They can access the very best healthcare. More money means more choices. You might really hate your job and be suffering with some elements of your job. More money means you might be able to go part-time, retire earlier, spend more time with your loved ones. All of these things will help reduce your overall levels of suffering, because no matter how good the party is, the party has to stop at some point. I love a good concert, live music, but the band has to leave the stage and we have to find the nearest exit. I love playing my drums, but the gig must stop at some point. A good example for me would be, I absolutely love going on water slides. It's something that makes me feel like a child, that inner child, and it's such joy and excitement. But that feeling is not sustainable. You will feel that all day, but then it's closing time and you have to leave the water park and you have to go back to life, whatever life is throwing at you at that moment. So rather than thinking of the water park as the key to happiness, think of it as a key to reduce suffering. So my advice would be, don't get too comfortable. If you're this happy person, really, really happy, don't get too comfortable. And if you're someone on the opposite end, if you're a depressed person watching this, you might be thinking, yeah, I know life is suffering. How does that help? But to me, it kind of takes off a bit of that pressure and that feeling of, I'm not normal. Well, to me, having some level of depression is kind of normal. To me, it's a normal reaction to the state of the world. It's not surprising that you get some very intelligent people who go through some quite serious depression. And again, you could say the happier people are just more ignorant. Ignorance is bliss. So whenever you've got a minute and you're not distracting yourself with all these endless devices, just breathe and acknowledge your place in life. You're not special. Your parents are not special. Nobody is special. You were not put on this planet to be happy. You were put on this planet to exist. You're born, you die. You have some control of how you spend the time between birth and death, but the fact remains. So acknowledge life is suffering, and just try and reduce the suffering during those years from birth to death. So we need to try and balance a lot of things in our life: work, relationship, hobbies. But for me, I needed to make some sacrifices in my 20s to save more money, because I knew that saving more money would increase my chances at a life with less suffering in the future. So I'll leave a link above on how I saved over £100,000 in my 20s. And to this day, even though I have a lot more freedom, a lot more financial buffer, I'm still choosing to work, because any extra money I have goes on quality time with my partner, which reduces my suffering. It enables me to retire less, reduces suffering because I don't love being at work. It allows me to spend time with my family, spend some money so we can all temporarily reduce our levels of suffering. And the key motivation for me at the moment is saving money for my next house, because the first house that I bought and I lived in for 3 years, I was very unhappy in. So my motivation was to save more money to buy a better house. Long story short, living in a terraced house with thin walls and bad neighbours is not a good combination, so my next house will be a detached. A detached house would lessen my suffering. That is undeniable. But that's a whole other video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.